Hello, this is Todd Siegel. Welcome to the Psychic Zone. Anyway, haven't been on here for a while, and I have another podcast that's going to be coming out soon I was a special guest of one of my clients, longtime client, who's also doing intuitive readings herself. And the purpose of this podcast, I wanted to acknowledge I've had people come to me recently who are getting into psychic detective work, and I wanted to, everybody asks me, do you teach classes? Can you help me with doing this? And I don't really know how to answer. It's I'm sure there's people out there who have classes for this kind of thing, but I wouldn't even know where to begin. And had a request recently, somebody who's a psychic detective, and so I dedicate this to this new talent, this new force of people who want to do this kind of work, and give you helpful tips and also give you some warnings about what you might have to deal with and what you might come across and how not to be affected by it. It is hard. It is really hard because you're dealing with the general public. And that is one of the biggest problems that I've had in my long career doing this. Of course, there are wonderful things, and you should always kind of keep those at the top of your head. No matter what you do, no matter how oppositional people are to what you do, is to always remain positive because you've helped somebody. And the work I've done, the amount of people I've helped, is quite large. I don't say that in an egotistical way. I'm just stating facts. I get letters from people all the time. One of the hard things, and it shows how long I've been doing this, is I'll often get a email from a client whose dog I rescued a long time ago. Thank you for rescuing our dog. She passed recently from old age. It might have been 5, 10 years, 15 years. I found a pet for somebody. And then also the cases that I've worked on, because a lot of you want to work on cases and you want to kind of get your feet wet in that. So I'm going to pick out some stuff that is very important, or at least that I have to deal with daily. And it's kind of interesting. I still get so much feedback from some of the videos I've done of crimes, Idaho 4, and a lot of other crimes out there. And there is a difference between when you're randomly giving an opinion on a case, not working on it, not working for anybody, and you're giving an opinion on the case, and then it's suddenly different when you work on a case for somebody. And I think that's one of the hardest things about psychic detective work, is working for somebody. Sometimes it can go fabulous. You can get all sorts of details, and then other times it's thrown off, and you're wondering what is going on here. And this is just kind of an analysis, a comparison. But some of the biggest issues I have come from people in this country. I'm not going to be biased, but I think the movies and the stuff on the internet and things in our culture about psychics is absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. Oh, there's some great mediums and readers all over America, but it's the stigma and the persona of what a psychic's supposed to be in the eyes of the public, how they should work, that is the biggest problem. I don't get this overseas often. I think people overseas have a different view of life. They have a different view of spirituality. It's intertwined in their culture, whether it's in their marriages or in their daily work or their philosophy of life. It is so much different than here. And so are psychics. And they often take it very seriously. But, Hollywood and the media and the shows on TV have all put psychic work in a negative. And I'm sure I'm going to get some opposition to that. But there isn't one week that goes by that it doesn't come into play with what I do. Unfortunately, I've got a lot of longtime clients who have come to me who understand these things, and it makes it easier. But recently, I actually did not make my booking available to the general public. So now people have to write to me, email me the purpose of why they have come to me, why they want a reading. If it's new people, if it's people that already come to me, I basically send them a link to my schedule. But this is because it has, we're in a very intense year, astrologically, psychologically. It's a very tough year. But I had to make this change. I've done this too long to have to deal with having to explain myself over and over and over to the general population. So as a new psychic, if you're doing this work, you can print this on your website, but nobody's going to read it. That's just from experience. Nobody reads anything anymore. Or they read things, but they misinterpret it. So unfortunately, when you work for somebody new, could be law enforcement, you have to tell them exactly what they can expect, what you can do and can't do, and how things work in the psychic world. That is very, very important first. So, of course, we'll talk about how to gather information, and that is very important too. But, I had a kind of an influence when I was first starting out, a man who was a very prominent psychic detective who worked for the police, and he was on TV, but he was a very kind of a low-key person. He kept his life very private and did not fall prey to all the entertainment out there, because there's a lot of entertainers out there. And he once told me, I wish we weren't called psychics, because the general population thinks of us as magicians. They think that we know everything, that they don't have to say anything. We should be able to read their minds. We should know all the answers. And he says, between you and me, that's not true. That's not how we get information. So having I was I was kind of coached and warned early on in my career about what it was going to be like. And I thought about it for a long time. I'm talking about years before I even started doing this as a job. And I didn't want to just be an entertainer. I really wanted to actually accomplish work in this. I wanted to be what I called a proof psychic. I wanted to provide proof. So I was around animals every day. I ran a farm. I helped animals. I thought, well, maybe I'll work with pets first. Maybe I'll find missing pets, because I had already found missing pets in my neighborhood for people. And I'll go from there, because then I don't have to deal with people so much. Although that's not true, or didn't end up being true. So when I work on missing pet cases, I have to get involved with the owner of those pets or the caretakers of those pets. Most of the time, there's a reason why those pets go missing. It might not be intentional, but all sorts of things. Somebody's having a baby. Somebody's moving houses. Somebody's going through divorce. Bad health issues can also make this happen. Of course, those are just a few examples, but it's hard not to get involved with the pet owners when I'm doing a missing pet reading. And that's just the truth. That goes for missing objects too. I had a case like that recently where I found a bunch of jewelry for an older woman, more mature, lovely person to work with. And anyway, I don't want to reveal too much, but she had lost all the jewelry that her deceased husband had given her. But I felt very surely that that was coming back to her. There wasn't some reason that it should be away from her. The only reason was she forgot where. And she was trying to protect it and hid it somewhere and didn't know where. Well, sure enough, she found it in a similar place that I told her to look. But intentions situations, lifestyle situations, these all come into play with being a psychic detective. When I'm working on criminal cases or trying to find a missing person or trying to find some crime that, what happened, you're working with somebody, obviously, who's hired you. It can go either way between a private person and then also a police department. So you need information in order to get vision, to make the psychic stream work. You need information, basic stuff. So this is very important. If there's things they don't want to tell you, that makes it much, much harder and can throw you off and give you misinformation. So when you work for an entity, please tell them that you have to be open and just tell me like it is. Of course, it can go the other way too. I've worked with people who give me all of their conspiracy theories, all of what they think happened in this case, and that can kind of drive you crazy too. But when asked questions, they should be open to you. That will make things much easier when investigating. I can give you a lot of examples of this. A lot of examples. I remember working on this one case where somebody passed away in a rural location. And they wanted to know who committed this. And all I can say, it was in the south somewhere. And the weather was not so good. I think it was very rainy at that time. And it really didn't occur to them, actually. So this wasn't an intentional misgiving of information, but all along I was really going back and forth with the couple suspects that were related to this person. But it wasn't until one bit of evidence came forward that I finally knew who committed this. And it ended up there were more people involved than just one. And just a little tidbit was, by the way, he wasn't wearing the same clothes that they weren't his clothes. Well, gee, you should have told that to me in the beginning, because a lot of people are afraid to give us too much information, but that is very valuable information that can actually give me a vision of who the perpetrator is. That's just the way it goes. So things change when you get that bit of information. You're going to get so much information from so many different directions when you're on a case that sometimes you just have to put them kind of like on the shelf. Just hang them up until they're useful and then analyze it. So it is good to be kind of a little careful when you go into a situation. But in some situations that are very desperate, give them all you have, even if it sounds a bit... don't be afraid to give wrong answers. They may not be wrong answers. They might actually be information related to the case. Or it could be information related to somebody that the suspect is with. That often happens too. So, yeah, information is very key. If you are looking for a missing person, usually I will ask for certain things. The first is their first name. Second, I want to know their age. Okay? Then I need to know location. Exact addresses are key. Knowing the time of day and what day that they went missing is very important too. So this is all basic information. But unfortunately in our society, they think, oh, you're a psychic. Well, you should know all this stuff. I don't need to tell you anything. You're not a real psychic if you know this. That is absolute horse poop. Absolute horse poop. And I get so angry every time I hear that. Because I'm like, do you want me to help you or do you not want me to help you? And I get this all the time. So you'll take your vision. There was some runaway suspects out west. That's all I can say. I think it was near Colorado and Nebraska or somewhere. And I remember that there were little tiny details that helped me find them. It could be a clue like this person was institutionalized, or this person's an alcoholic. Now, do you automatically know that? No, it may take time until you know they're intoxicated. But it is helpful to hear from the client if they are or not. Because you can either say alcohol led to this or alcohol didn't lead to this. I do that all the time. You know, well, I just want you to know about this guy that, you know, he was a drug addict once. In the back of my mind, okay, are drugs responsible for him going missing? And I'll be like, no. It gives me a clear answer. So I think that it's really explaining to your client how things work. I love working for the police. I will admit that, because there's no emotion and there's no bias with anything they answer. Now, sometimes they cannot give you key evidence or pictures or stuff like that. That's understandable. But it's when somebody is trying to hide the evidence, trying to test you, so to speak, we call this testing, that it can completely throw you off. And, you know, I've heard that, I've been on cases that are very frustrating like that. They leave out a little clue that might be very important, such as from the scene of the crime. I had one, we forgot to mention that there was a trail of blood. Well, of course they think, no, you should have seen that, you're the psychic. But I may not be looking in that direction. I don't see every little detail about everything. I might be thinking more about where the person's going than the fact that there's a blood trail. And I tend to get a little bit of an arrogance from people that about that, and I won't work with them. I just won't work with them. Or I'll make it very clear to them. But that's something that is important to tell the client. As far as gathering your information psychically, don't put pressure on that. You may not get an answer, or you may get something really small. And I had this the other day, too. I was asked by police about 3 different, let's say, crime breakers. Out of the 3, one of them was pretty severe mentally. I'm still working on this, by the way. But the thing, so this recent one, this is a male who's got a long list of crimes, who escaped from the police. I'm not going to give any more details about this case because it's an open case. But I wasn't getting a location immediately, but I was getting his personality coming to me, and his attitude. And I was focusing on that. Not necessarily, I know they want to find where he is. But it was just the way he worked in his mind. And that told me a lot. And I think it told me a lot about his location. I do think he's in hiding right now. But what was interesting was you would think this person would leave the state, or leave the country for that matter. They escaped. But no, not his attitude. He's a mean guy. Yeah, got a lot of emotional issues, but he's stubborn. It's kind of telling me I'm just going to hide out here. They're not going to find me. You know, that kind of attitude. Logic dictates that he got out of town. No, not exactly. I think he's planning to. But he's kind of a cool customer. Wants to wait until the things settle down and the law sort of forgets about him. And then he'll make his move. Also, one of the hard things when we're looking for suspects too nowadays is the effects of drugs on these individuals. It can send you for a loop sometimes, because if you're really reading this person closely, these drugs have a really severe effect on them mentally. You can get rage, anger. They might be showing you things they did in their past. They might be showing you people that they're going after, or they're going to go visit or something. So you can get a lot of choppy air when you're trying to read into a suspect. And a lot of people think that whether we're finding a person or we're finding a pet, that X marks the spot. We should know exactly where they are. No, not true. We gather evidence just like law enforcement does, in a different way. We're not getting it from outside, out in the field. We're getting it in our psychic field. So this is how we gather evidence. And it takes a lot of evidence in our mind until we can actually come to what we think happened, where we're going. And these recent cases, there's one about a woman. This is another one that I was asked to look again at. Young woman. She just has a drunk driving record. Just one. But she's been very manipulated by a boyfriend in bad ways. I feel some prostitution going on there. I'm feeling some bad stuff. So I'm trying to find locations, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll get a visual of the location, but I don't get the whole picture. So I just have to wait, In a place where there's a lot of flat country, for instance, and I'm seeing a lot of kind of, if it's flat, dry country, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing a lot of green and trees and hills. That's what I see. I might not necessarily know the place. But keep open. Names will come to you. Or a letter of a place. Revisiting cases is sometimes hard because you don't want to contradict the information that you gave them before, but just be open to new information. Start clean. That's very helpful. But, I used to say I wouldn't get involved in the psychology or in the brain of some of these criminals, but sometimes you have to. Sometimes that can tell you where they're going. And any means possible is what I say. And if you're hesitant about giving too much information, that's fine too. I would just tell your client that I will let you know when I have more. On missing pet cases, it's very interesting because if there's a pet gone for 2 weeks, let's say it's a dog, there hasn't been a sighting, I'll give them information. I'll wait till another sighting occurs. But then I'll also tell them, please reach out to me in 2 days. And they'll be like, why? Because I want to know, I want you to check in with me. And they'll be like, okay. And the reason for it is I'll look at my Google map again. Because if all of a sudden I get more movement or a different location, well, bingo, that tells me my pet is alive. So that's how I go over stuff. I may not have more information, but I'll give them an area. I'm like, okay, well, we were in the east. Now I'm going west. And that usually tells me the pet's on the run. Why is that helpful? Because if the owner felt like the pet was stolen, That tells me the pet wasn't stolen, the pet's out. It's really hard work. And I know some of you are new to this, but don't get burned out. If you have a hobby, do it every day. I can only do up to 4 hours in a day of this kind of work. That's it. Of course, when I was younger, I'd, be the all day, all night psychic. Cannot do that anymore. If you're burnt out, it makes it tougher. But also, I think that don't be deterred by the work. You're going to have times when people, clients, general public are really going to get you down. And I don't get this too much anymore, actually. I really don't. But I used to. When I first started this, people were nasty. And I finally just said, I'm not going to talk to you. I helped on so many free cases, just exposing people to what I did, and it made a huge impact. So unfortunately, you may have to do some charity work too if you're trying to get exposed. You don't have to advertise. Reputation, word of mouth is the best thing. I was working on a situation with a client the other day. I've been talking to her since, she told me since about 2020. And she's in such a hard place. Her husband, unfortunately, she found out through the reading that I gave her that he was involved in sexual affairs for a long time. She didn't know. But she finally got evidence, real evidence. I mean, the actual people, the testimonies, all this. She was horrified. And, when you're dealing with a client, a lot of emotions, and, she's got a lot of kids. And a very, very good person. And, it's kind of like, what should I, you get asked, what should I do? What should I do? Well, you can give your opinion. I know what I would do. But I don't see you doing it. And I get that a lot. It's like you want to give them a suggestion, but they just won't do it. And they come back to you 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. In this case, 6 years. And they still won't leave the situation. They're pressed. Yeah, it's a very hard thing. But I do think there are options. And so sometimes this work can be kind of a little hard, but be truthful. Always be truthful. If you get in a situation with a client and you feel uneasy about them, please tell them. Be very kind. Just say, I just can't help you. Lately, too, I've had people, in this day of computers and electronics, I wanted to say something about this, too. There's a lot of crime going on in the computer world and the internet. It's really awful. I knew it would come to this. Yeah, I must be psychic or something. But anyway, it is very hard to read or to find suspects electronically. Yes, there are people who do readings by email. I'm one of them. Some do it by text and are very good at it. Great, wonderful. But when you have deceivers on the internet, people who, somebody says, well, I was contacted by a woman who made threats. I'm like, how? Through an app. And I'm like, how do you know it's a woman? Well, she says she's from this country. How do you know? So my rule of thumb is, first, voice gives us psychic. It supports the psychic stream. The voice, the vibration of the voice. Of course, touch or being in person, yes, those things can help. Handwriting, handwritten letters, letters sent from somebody are very valuable to the psychic stream. But messages electronically, in my opinion, no. No. Yeah, of course, I have worked on cases where people were taken advantage of online by somebody on a dating app, usually. Wow, I'll tell you, some of these cases that I have heard from these people are frightening. But I am guilty in the fact that I did give them actually valuable information, because I think I had enough evidence to work with this case. Meaning, there was some physical evidence. There were some flowers sent physically to that person, to their home. There was something of a letter that was written by hand. Now, these were given by unknowns, not the actual suspect themselves, but it still gave me enough information to target this person. This person stole a lot of money from this person. And finally, she had to involve the FBI with it. And I'm not sure how it ended. I didn't hear back. But that was all they could do. It was somebody from out of the country. Somebody actually confessed to this crime. I think they were in England or somewhere. But they wouldn't make themselves known to law enforcement. They just said, we're very sorry. They took the money and ran. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars. A lot of money. So, if you're new to this kind of work, you're going to be in all sorts of situations, especially with the new computer technology age. Just go with it. But don't always be too willing to take on cases. Find out information first. That's very important. You can't please everyone, but you can protect yourself But explaining yourself over and over again is just going to come with the territory. You can write a disclaimer down on your website like I do. It doesn't matter. People will take advantage. So you have to screen things very, very well. And it's one of the frustrations that I've been through over and over again. So anyway, please write a comment and let me know what you think of this, if it's been helpful to you. And for those of you that are joining this world of psychic detectives, let me know what questions you have. And I'd be very happy to help. Anyway, I'm going to end things now and have a good day. Goodbye for now.